The ice storm hit Millbrook Construction Site 3 like a frozen sledgehammer. Jake Morrison pulled his thick jacket tighter around his shoulders as he watched the weather reports on his tablet. The meteorologists were calling it a once-in-a-century storm, the kind that turned highways into skating rinks and power lines into death traps. "Boss, we should pack it up," called Tommy Chun, his site supervisor, from across the muddy lot. Ice pellets were already starting to ping off their hard hats like angry marbles. "Weather Service says it's only getting worse." Jake nodded, but didn't move from his position near the half-finished office complex. 27 men and women worked this site, and every one of them had families to get home to. The problem was the access road. It wound down a steep hillside for 3 miles before reaching the main highway, and in conditions like this, it would become a death trap within the hour. "Get everyone gathered by the main trailer," Jake shouted over the increasing wind. "We need to move fast." The construction site buzzed with activity as workers secured equipment and gathered tools. Jake had been a foreman for 12 years, ever since leaving the Army Corps of Engineers, and he'd never seen weather deteriorate this quickly. The temperature had dropped 15 degrees in the last hour, and the ice was building up on every surface faster than anyone had expected. Maria Santos, the site's heavy equipment operator, jogged up to Jake with her keys jangling. "Wanting to take the grader down the hill first? Clear a path for the cars." "Too dangerous," Jake replied immediately. "If that machine slides off the road, we lose our best chance of getting everyone out safely." The team assembled near the cluster of temporary buildings they used as offices and break rooms. 27 people, ranging from 19-year-old apprentices to 60-year-old veterans who'd been building things since before Jake was born. They all looked to him with the kind of trust that came from years of working dangerous jobs together. "Here's the situation," Jake announced, his voice cutting through the storm's noise. "The road's already getting slick, and it's only going to get worse. We have maybe 30 minutes before it becomes impassable." "What about waiting it out?" asked Steve Murphy, a crane operator with 3 kids at home. "Storm's supposed to break by tomorrow morning." Jake shook his head. "Power's already flickering in town. If we lose heat up here overnight, we're in serious trouble. And if anyone has a medical emergency, emergency services won't be able to reach us." The group fell silent except for the increasing rattle of ice against metal buildings. Jake could see the worry in their faces. These weren't people who scared easily, but they understood the mathematics of weather and physics as well as anyone. "Here's what we're going to do," Jake continued. "We're going to move as a convoy. Slowest vehicles in the middle, trucks with the best traction at the front and rear. Maria, you'll take the grader down ahead of us, but only far enough to break up the worst ice buildup. Tommy, you coordinate radio traffic. Everyone else, no heroes. If your car starts sliding, don't try to correct it. Just ride it out and trust your neighbors to help." The next 20 minutes became a carefully orchestrated dance of preparation. Tire chains went on every vehicle that could handle them. Sand and salt were loaded into the backs of pickup trucks. Emergency supplies were distributed evenly among the vehicles in case anyone got stranded. Jake watched it all with the kind of focused attention that had served him well in the military. Every person had a role, every contingency had been considered, and every decision prioritized the safety of the group over individual convenience or property. "Boss," Tommy said, walking up with his radio crackling with weather updates. "Highway Patrol just closed Route 34. That's our backup route if the main road doesn't work." "Then, the main road has to work," Jake replied simply. Maria fired up the massive road grader, its diesel engine growling like a mechanical beast. The machine's blades scraped against the frozen ground, throwing sparks where ice met steel. She moved slowly down the hill, creating a rough path through the accumulating ice. The convoy formed behind her. Jake positioned himself in the middle of the group, driving his sturdy pickup truck where he could reach anyone who needed help. His radio crackled with check-ins from every vehicle. "Vehicle 7, checking in. Vehicle 12, all secure back here. Vehicle 3, chains are holding good." The first mile went smoothly. Maria's grader carved a passable route through the worst sections, and the convoy maintained a steady pace down the winding road. Jake felt the first stirrings of optimism. Maybe they'd actually pull this off. Then, Vehicle 15 started sliding. "Mayday, mayday," came the voice of Carlos Hernandez over the radio. "I'm losing on the big curve. Can't stop sliding toward the guardrail." Jake could see Carlos's compact car in his rearview mirror, fishtailing wildly as it approached a section where the road curved sharply around a rocky outcrop. Below the guardrail lay a 40-foot drop into a creek bed filled with boulders. Everyone else, full stop, Jake commanded into his radio. Do not attempt to help. Carlos, turn into the slide and ease off the brake. But Carlos's car was already past the point of driver control. It spun completely around and slammed into the guardrail backward, metal shrieking against metal. For a moment, it looked like the barrier would hold. Then, Jake heard the sound that would haunt his dreams for years afterward. The sharp crack of breaking metal followed by the crash of a car tumbling down a steep hillside. Vehicle 15 is down, Jake announced into his radio, his voice steady despite the adrenaline flooding his system. Tommy, get on the emergency frequency. Tell them we have a vehicle in the ravine with potential injuries. Jake, emergency services are already saying they can't respond, Tommy replied. Roads are too dangerous for ambulances. Jake was already out of his truck, pulling emergency gear from his cargo bed. Maria, bring the grader back up here. Everyone else, I need rope, first aid supplies, and anyone with medical training. The next hour transformed the construction crew into a rescue team. Using the grader's winch and every piece of rope they could find, they rigged a system to lower Jake into the ravine where Carlos's car had come to rest against a large boulder. The descent was treacherous. Ice coated every surface, and the storm showed no signs of letting up. Jake's military training kicked in as he rappelled down the rope line, his headlamp cutting through the darkness and swirling ice. Carlos was conscious but trapped, his leg pinned beneath the dashboard of his crumpled car. Jake, that you, boss? Yeah, Carlos, it's me. We're going to get you out of here. My leg's busted up pretty bad, and I think I might have some ribs broken too. Jake assessed the situation quickly. The car was stable against the boulder, but Carlos couldn't be moved without proper medical equipment. Moving him incorrectly could turn a broken leg into a life-threatening injury. Carlos, I need you to listen carefully, Jake said, positioning himself where he could see his injured worker's face. We're going to stabilize you here and then get you to proper medical care. But it's going to take some time. Storm's getting worse, isn't it? Jake looked up at the ice-covered rope disappearing into the darkness above. Yeah, it is. But we're not leaving you down here. The radio on Jake's belt crackled with Tommy's voice. Boss, I hate to tell you this, but we're getting word that the main road just became completely impassable. Tree down about half a mile ahead of our position. Jake keyed his radio carefully, not wanting Carlos to hear the full extent of their situation. Understood. What's our timeline looking like? Emergency services are saying maybe 12 hours before they can reach us. Could be longer if this ice storm keeps building. 12 hours. Carlos needed medical attention now, not 12 hours from now. And the rest of the crew was stuck on an increasingly dangerous mountain road with limited supplies and no shelter. Tommy, new plan, Jake said into his radio. I need you to coordinate moving everyone back up to the construction site. Use the grader to clear a path. Set up the trailer as an emergency shelter. What about you and Carlos? Jake looked at the injured man, who was trying to stay conscious despite obvious pain and the shock of his injuries. We're going to figure something out. What Jake figured out over the next several hours would later be studied by military strategists and emergency response teams around the world. Using nothing but construction equipment, basic supplies, and an unwavering determination to protect his people, he orchestrated one of the most innovative rescue operations in modern history. First, he used the grader's blade to create a windbreak around Carlos's position, piling snow and ice to form a crude shelter. Then, he had the crew lower emergency supplies, including sleeping bags, a portable heater, and a complete first aid kit. But the real innovation came when Jake realized that the construction site's concrete mixer could be modified into an improvised ambulance. Working by radio with Maria and Tommy, he guided them through the process of removing the mixing drum and installing a makeshift patient compartment using lumber and insulation from their supply stockpiles. You're out of your mind, boss, Carlos said with a weak laugh as Jake explained the plan. You're going to haul me up this cliff in a concrete truck? Not just any concrete truck, Jake replied, checking the stabilization splints he'd improvised for Carlos's leg. The world's first mountain rescue concrete truck. Maria's been driving heavy equipment for 20 years. If anyone can make this work, it's her. The extraction took 6 hours. 6 hours of careful winching, precise maneuvering, and constant radio coordination between Jake in the ravine and his crew above. When Carlos finally reached the surface, stabilized, and ready for transport to proper medical care, the entire crew erupted in cheers that could be heard over the howling wind. But they weren't done yet. The storm had trapped all of them on the mountain, and emergency services still couldn't reach their location. Jake's crew spent the next 18 hours turning a construction site into a fully functional emergency shelter, complete with heat, food, and medical care for anyone who needed it. They used earth-moving equipment to clear helicopter landing zones. They rigged emergency lighting using work spotlights and portable generators. They even established radio contact with emergency services and began coordinating rescue efforts for other motorists trapped by the storm throughout the region. By the time the storm finally broke and rescue helicopters arrived, Jake Morrison's construction crew had become the unofficial emergency command center for the entire mountain region. They'd rescued not just themselves and Carlos, but had coordinated the evacuation of dozens of other people trapped by the ice storm. The news media called it a miracle. Emergency response professionals called it innovative thinking under pressure. The families of everyone involved called it exactly what they expected from Jake Morrison and his crew. Jake himself just called it doing the job. But as he stood in the hospital later that week, watching Carlos joke with the nurses while his leg healed in traction, he had no idea that their entire rescue operation had been observed by someone very far from Earth. Someone who had been watching human behavior for quite some time, and who had just witnessed something that would change the course of galactic history. High above Earth's atmosphere, invisible to human detection systems, an ancient scout ship recorded every detail of the ice storm rescue. The ship's artificial intelligence analyzed Jake Morrison's decision-making process, his crew's loyalty and coordination, and the innovative solutions they developed under impossible pressure. The analysis was forwarded through quantum communication channels to the Galactic Confederation Council, where it would join thousands of other reports about species throughout the galaxy. Most of these reports were routine observations of civilizations that showed promise, but lacked the specific qualities the Confederation sought in new members. Jake Morrison's report was different. It contained a single notation that appeared in only one file out of every million species evaluations. Potential command candidate identified. Recommend immediate advancement to Phase 2 evaluation protocols. As Jake drove home from the hospital, tired but satisfied that his entire crew was safe and accounted for, he noticed an unusual star in the eastern sky. It seemed brighter than the others, and it appeared to be moving in a way that didn't match any aircraft he recognized. He watched it for a moment, then shrugged and continued driving. He had work to do tomorrow, and his crew was depending on him to keep their projects on schedule. The star continued its slow movement across the sky, heading toward a mountain valley 30 miles from Millbrook. By morning, it would have landed, and Jake Morrison's life would be about to change in ways that no human had ever experienced. But for now, he was just a construction foreman who'd had a very long week, driving home through clear skies after making sure all his people were safe. In his mind, that was the only thing that mattered. The universe, however, was beginning to have very different plans for Jake Morrison. Jake Morrison was drinking his second cup of coffee and reviewing the insurance paperwork from the ice storm incident when Tom Meachin burst through the door of the site office trailer, his face pale and his hands shaking. "Boss, you need to see this. Right now." Jake looked up from the stack of forms that seemed to multiply every time he filled one out. "What's got you so worked up, Tommy? Did another tree fall on the access road?" "No, boss. This is bigger than trees." Tommy grabbed Jake's arm and started pulling him toward the door. Much bigger. Jake allowed himself to be dragged outside, where he found his entire crew gathered in a rough semicircle near the equipment yard. They all stood perfectly still, staring at something beyond the line of earth-moving machinery. "What's everyone looking at?" Jake asked, but then he saw it for himself and felt his coffee mug slip from suddenly nerveless fingers. In the middle of the cleared area where they'd been planning to pour the foundation for Building C, there was a ship. Not a helicopter, not an airplane, Not any kind of aircraft Jake had ever seen in his 12 years working construction sites near military bases. This was something that belonged in science fiction movies, not in rural Colorado. The ship was roughly triangular, about the size of a small house, and made of what looked like polished silver metal that seemed to shift color depending on how the sunlight hit it. It sat on 3 legs that extended from its underside, each one ending in what appeared to be a large pad that hadn't left so much as a scorch mark on the ground. "How long has it been here?" Jake asked quietly. "Maria found it when she came in to warm up the equipment this morning," Tommy replied. "Been sitting there for maybe 2 hours. No sound, no movement, nothing." Jake walked slowly toward the ship, his mind racing through every possible explanation. Military test aircraft made the most sense, but this didn't look like anything the military would build. And why would they land on a construction site without any warning or communication? "Anyone tried to approach it?" Jake asked. "We were waiting for you," said Maria Santos, not taking her eyes off the craft. "Figured if something was going to eat the boss, we'd all rather be here to watch it happen." Despite the surreal situation, Jake found himself smiling. His crew's dark humor remained intact, even when faced with something that defied all explanation. That consistency was somehow reassuring. "All right, everyone stay back while I take a look," Jake said, pulling out his cell phone. "And somebody call the sheriff's department. They should probably know about this." "Already tried," said Steve Murphy, holding up his own phone. "No signal. Any of us. Cell towers might still be down from the storm." Jake approached the ship slowly, his engineer's mind automatically cataloging details. The surface appeared seamless, with no visible bolts, welds, or joints. The metal itself seemed to absorb sound. His footsteps, which should have echoed off the hard surface, made almost no noise. When he was about 10 feet away, something on the ship's surface began to glow. A rectangular section near what Jake assumed was the front started emitting a soft blue light. The light intensified, and then the section simply wasn't there anymore. Not open, not slid away, just gone, as if someone had erased that part of the ship with an invisible eraser. Jake stopped walking. In his military experience, when something unexplained happened, the smart move was to take cover and call for backup. But backup wasn't available, and his crew was standing behind him, trusting him to handle whatever the situation turned out to be. A figure appeared in the opening where the glowing section had been. It was humanoid, but definitely not human. Tall and slender, with pale blue skin and large dark eyes that seemed to take up half its face. It wore what looked like a simple gray uniform that covered most of its body, leaving only its head and hands visible. The being looked directly at Jake and spoke in perfect English. "You are Jake Morrison, construction foreman, former United States Army Corps of Engineers. Age 34, unmarried, responsible for the safety and welfare of 27 workers at this location." Jake's mouth went dry. "That's correct. Who are you, and what do you want?" The being stepped out of the ship with fluid, graceful movements. Up close, Jake could see that its hands had 4 fingers instead of 5, and its skin had a subtle pattern that reminded him of scales or tree bark. "I am Observer Zenth of the Galactic Confederation's Evaluation Division. I am here because your actions during the recent severe weather event have been analyzed and found to meet specific criteria that my organization monitors." "I'm sorry, what?" Jake felt like his brain was trying to process too much information at once. "Galactic what now?" "Confederation, an alliance of spacefaring civilizations that has existed for approximately 12,000 of your years. We monitor developing species throughout this region of the galaxy, watching for individuals who display the qualities necessary for membership in our organization." Jake glanced back at his crew, who were still standing in their semicircle, but had moved closer. He could see the mixture of fear and fascination on their faces. "And you think I have these qualities?" "We know you do," Observer Zenth replied. "Your performance during the ice storm rescue operation demonstrated strategic thinking, resource optimization, and, most importantly, an absolute commitment to protecting those under your command. These are the primary characteristics we look for in potential Confederation officers." "Officers?" Jake felt like he was trapped in someone else's dream. "Look, I appreciate whatever it is you think I did, but I'm just a construction foreman. I build buildings and keep people safe. I'm not officer material for anything galactic." Observer Zinta's large eyes seemed to focus more intently on Jake's face. You coordinated a complex rescue operation using improvised equipment and untrained personnel. You maintained group morale and discipline under extreme stress. You prioritized mission success over personal safety. You adapted to changing conditions and developed innovative solutions with limited resources. These actions saved lives and demonstrated exactly the kind of leadership the Confederation requires. Tommy stepped forward from the group. Boss, maybe we should hear what he has to say. Jake looked at his crew supervisor, a man who'd worked dangerous jobs for 20 years and had never met a problem he couldn't solve with the right equipment and enough coffee. If Tommy thought they should listen to an alien talking about galactic confederations, maybe the situation deserved more consideration. All right, Jake said, turning back to Observer Zinth. What exactly is the Confederation, and what does membership involve? The Confederation maintains peace and stability across approximately 200,000 inhabited star systems. Member species contribute according to their abilities and specializations. Some provide scientific research, others offer manufacturing capabilities, and others serve in our peacekeeping forces. And humans would serve as peacekeepers. Specifically, humans would serve in command positions within our peacekeeping forces. Your species has demonstrated unique abilities in tactical innovation, crisis leadership, and what you call thinking outside the box. These skills are extremely rare among galactic civilizations. Jake rubbed his forehead, feeling the beginning of what promised to be a massive headache. Let me see if I understand this correctly. You're saying that humans are good at military leadership, not military leadership as you understand it. Command leadership, the ability to take responsibility for others, make decisions under pressure, and maintain unit cohesion in impossible circumstances. Most species in the galaxy are highly specialized but lack flexibility. Humans possess an unusual combination of intelligence, adaptability, and protective instinct that makes them ideal command candidates. Maria walked up to join the conversation, her expression skeptical. And what happens if we're not interested in joining your space club? Observer Zinth turned to look at her with what might have been surprise. Nothing happens. The Confederation never forces membership on any species. If you decline our invitation, we simply continue monitoring your development and perhaps extend the invitation again in a few centuries. But if we accept, Jake asked, then you begin training for command positions within our fleet. The process takes approximately 2 of your years and involves learning to work with multiple alien species, understanding our technology, and developing the skills necessary to command vessels capable of traveling between stars. Steve Murphy, who'd been listening quietly, spoke up. What kind of vessels are we talking about here? Observer Zinth gestured toward his ship. This is a short-range scout vessel. Command officers typically operate ships ranging from exploration cruisers with crews of 50 to battle cruisers with crews of 5,000. In extreme situations, human commanders have proven capable of coordinating entire fleets consisting of hundreds of ships. Jake felt his engineering mind starting to engage despite the surreal nature of the conversation. You're talking about starships, faster-than-light travel, all of that science fiction stuff. Your science fiction contains remarkably accurate predictions of technological development. Faster-than-light travel, energy weapons, artificial intelligence, and planetary engineering are all routine technologies within the Confederation. And humans would be in charge of ships using these technologies? In command positions, yes. Technical operation requires specialized training that takes decades to master. But command decisions, tactical innovation, and crew management are areas where humans excel naturally. Tommy scratched his head thoughtfully. Boss, remember that leadership course you took when you were getting promoted to foreman? The one where they said the best leaders are the ones who take care of their people first and worry about everything else second. Yeah, I remember. Sounds like that's exactly what this alien is talking about. Jake looked at Observer Zinth, who waited patiently for him to process the information. If I were to say yes to this training program, what would happen to my crew? To my job here? That would depend on your preferences. Some human candidates prefer to bring trusted associates with them for training. Others complete their initial service commitment and then return to their original careers. The Confederation values individual choice in these matters. And how many humans are currently serving in these command positions? You would be the first. Jake blinked. The first? As in, no other humans have ever done this. Correct. Your species was identified as having command potential approximately 50 years ago, but this is the first time we have observed an individual who meets our specific evaluation criteria. Jake felt the weight of the decision settling on his shoulders. Not just his future, but potentially the future of the entire human race. He looked at his crew, people who trusted him to keep them safe through dangerous weather and difficult working conditions. Can I have some time to think about this? Of course. However, I should mention that the Confederation's current situation may make time a limiting factor. What do you mean? Observer Zintha's expression became more serious. We are currently facing a crisis that has been developing for several decades. A hostile species known as the Devourers has been expanding aggressively into Confederation space. They destroy rather than conquer, and they show no interest in communication or negotiation. We have been forced to take increasingly defensive postures. And you think humans can help with this problem? We believe human command instincts may be exactly what we need to develop more effective resistance strategies. Our current military leadership is competent but predictable. The Devourers have learned to counter our tactical approaches. Fresh thinking could be decisive. Jake thought about the ice storm rescue, about the improvised solutions and unorthodox approaches that had saved Carlos and gotten everyone to safety. Then he thought about doing the same thing on a scale involving starships and alien civilizations. If I say yes, when would this training begin? Immediately. The situation is becoming more urgent each year. Jake took a deep breath and looked at his crew one more time. Then he made the decision that would change not just his life, but the balance of power in an entire galaxy. All right, I'm in, but I have conditions. Observer Zintha's large eyes focused intently on Jake's face. What conditions? First, my crew comes with me. All of them. If you want human leadership, we're going to get human teamwork too. That can be arranged. Second, I want to understand exactly what I'm getting into before I commit to anything long-term. A probationary period where I can back out if this isn't working. Also acceptable. And third, I want to know more about these Devourers and what we'd be facing. Observer Zinth nodded slowly. Those details will be provided during your initial briefing. Are you prepared to depart immediately? Jake looked around the construction site that had been his world for the past 3 years. Equipment sat where his crew had left it yesterday morning, before their universe expanded to include alien civilizations and galactic wars. The half-finished buildings looked small and ordinary compared to what he was apparently being offered. Tommy, call the office and tell them we're going to be out of contact for a while. Family emergency. Boss, are you sure about this? Tommy asked. Jake smiled. No, I'm not sure about anything. But that's never stopped us before. 20 minutes later, Jake Morrison and his entire construction crew were walking toward Observer Zintha's ship, carrying nothing but their work gear and a handful of personal items. As they approached the opening in the ship's hull, Jake realized that everything he thought he knew about the universe had just become obsolete. The ship's interior was larger than should have been possible given its exterior dimensions. Clean white surfaces were covered with panels displaying symbols and diagrams that meant nothing to Jake, but suggested technology far beyond anything humans had developed. Is everyone ready? Observer Zinth asked as the crew settled into seats that adjusted automatically to fit each person's body. Jake looked around at his people. Maria gave him a thumbs up. Tommy was already examining the alien control panels with professional interest. Steve and Carlos, who'd insisted on coming despite still wearing a walking cast, were talking quietly about the implications of faster-than-light travel. We're ready, Jake said. Observer Zinth touched something on a nearby panel, and the ship lifted off so smoothly that Jake barely felt the motion. Through a transparent section of the hull that definitely hadn't been there when they boarded, he watched the construction site shrink away below them. Within minutes, they were looking down at Earth from space. Jake had seen pictures and videos of the planet from orbit, but seeing it directly was completely different. The blue and white sphere hanging in the darkness looked fragile and precious in a way that made him understand why he just agreed to help defend it. The journey to the training facility will take approximately 18 hours, Observer Zenth announced. I suggest you rest. Tomorrow, you begin learning to command starships. Jake settled back in his seat and watched Earth disappear behind them as the ship accelerated toward destinations he couldn't pronounce. Somewhere out there, an alien enemy was threatening civilizations he'd never heard of, and somehow he was supposed to help stop them. He'd handled worse situations before, Jake told himself, though he had to admit none of those situations had involved leaving the solar system. But his crew was with him, and they'd figure out together. They always did. The Confederation training facility appeared in their viewport like something from Jake's childhood dreams about the future. Massive ring-shaped structures rotated slowly around its central hub, connected by transport tubes that glowed with soft blue energy. Dozens of ships of various sizes and designs moved between docking ports, their hulls bearing markings from civilizations Jake couldn't begin to identify. "Welcome to Station Harmony," Observer Zenth announced as their ship approached one of the smaller docking rings. This facility trains approximately 8,000 officers annually from 43 different member species. Tommy pressed his face against the transparent hull material, watching the enormous structure grow larger as they approached. "Boss, how big is that thing?" "The main training ring has a diameter of 50 kilometers, Observer Zenth replied. "It houses educational facilities, simulation chambers, living quarters, and recreational areas for all member species." Jake tried to wrap his mind around the scale. 50 kilometers in diameter meant the station was larger than many cities on Earth. And this was just a training facility, not even a major population center. "How long has it been here?" Maria asked. Station Harmony was constructed approximately 3,000 years ago when the Confederation expanded beyond 100 member species and required centralized training facilities. The docking procedure was unlike anything Jake had experienced. Instead of the mechanical clamps and airlocks he expected from science fiction movies, their ship simply moved into an opening in the station's hull and was surrounded by a gentle blue field that held it in place. The sensation was so smooth that Jake didn't realize they'd stopped moving until Observer Zenth announced they had arrived. "Your quarters have been prepared in Section 12 of the Human Adaptation Wing," Observer Zenth said as he led them through corridors that seemed to stretch forever in both directions. "The station's artificial intelligence has been programmed with information about human dietary requirements, sleep cycles, and environmental preferences." The corridors themselves were a marvel of engineering. The walls displayed star maps and rotating diagrams that Jake assumed were educational materials. Other beings moved past them with purpose and efficiency, representing at least a dozen different species. Some were humanoid like Observer Zenth. Others looked like nothing Jake had ever imagined. "That one looks like a walking tree," Carlos whispered as a tall, brown being with bark-like skin passed by, nodding politely in their direction. "Sylvani Ambassador," Observer Zenth explained. "Their species specializes in environmental management and terraforming. Very peaceful people, excellent at long-term planning." They passed a group of beings that looked like large, intelligent bears having an animated discussion in a language that sounded like musical humming. A creature resembling a cross between a dolphin and a bird glided past them using some kind of personal flying harness. "The diversity is impressive," Jake said, trying to process everything he was seeing. "Wait until you attend your first interspecies tactical seminar," Observer Zenth replied. "You'll be working with representatives from most of these civilizations." The Human Adaptation Wing turned out to be an entire section of the station that had been modified to accommodate Earth normal gravity, atmosphere, and lighting. Their quarters were comfortable, but basic, similar to military housing Jake remembered from his Army days. Each crew member had a private room connected to common areas designed for group planning and relaxation. "Your formal orientation begins tomorrow," Observer Zenth explained as he showed them the main briefing room. "Tonight, I recommend you rest and begin reviewing the introductory materials that have been loaded into your room terminals." After Observer Zenth left them to settle in, Jake's crew gathered in the common room to discuss what they'd gotten themselves into. "Boss, I've been thinking," Tommy said, sprawled in a chair that had adjusted itself to support his body perfectly. "Back home, we knew how to handle every situation because we've been doing construction work for years. Here, We don't know anything about anything. That's not exactly true, Jake replied, looking around at his team. We know how to work together. We know how to solve problems. We know how to adapt to changing conditions. Those skills don't change just because we're in space. Maria activated the terminal built into the common room wall, and immediately the air in front of them filled with three-dimensional displays showing star maps, ship schematics, and tactical diagrams. This is incredible, she said, manipulating the displays with hand gestures. Look at this. It's showing the positions of every Confederation ship in real time across hundreds of star systems. Jake studied the tactical display, his military training helping him understand the basic layout, even though the scale was beyond anything he'd ever dealt with. Red markers indicated areas of Devourer activity. Blue markers showed Confederation defensive positions. The pattern that emerged was not encouraging. They're being pushed back, Steve observed, pointing to a cluster of red markers that seemed to be advancing steadily into Confederation space. Look at the time progression. The enemy's gaining ground. Jake manipulated the display to show the tactical situation from 3 months ago. Then 6 months, then a year. The pattern was consistent and alarming. The Confederation forces were fighting a disciplined defensive action, but they were definitely losing territory. No wonder they're looking for new approaches, Jake murmured. Their current strategy isn't working. The next morning brought Jake's first introduction to formal Confederation military doctrine. The briefing room filled with beings from a dozen species, all wearing uniforms that managed to accommodate vastly different body types while maintaining a sense of unified purpose. Commander Varix, a tall, four-armed being with purple skin and silver eyes, served as the primary instructor. His voice carried clearly throughout the room despite having an accent Jake couldn't identify. Welcome to Advanced Command Theory, Commander Varix announced. Today we will review standard fleet formations and their applications in various tactical scenarios. For the next 6 hours, Jake's brain was stretched in ways he'd never experienced. Confederation military doctrine was sophisticated and comprehensive, developed over thousands of years of experience with interstellar conflict. Fleet movements were coordinated across multiple star systems simultaneously. Battles involved energy weapons with ranges measured in light minutes. Supply lines stretched across distances that boggled the human mind. But, as impressive as it was, Jake began to notice patterns that bothered him. Commander Varix, Jake said during a break in the presentation, all of these formations assume that both sides will follow conventional tactical doctrine. That is correct. Standard engagement protocols have been refined through centuries of experience. But what if one side doesn't follow those protocols? What if they do something completely unexpected? Commander Varix's 4 eyes focused on Jake with what appeared to be mild confusion. Such actions would violate established principles of military efficiency. No competent commander would deviate from proven tactical approaches. Jake exchanged glances with Tommy, who raised his eyebrows in a way that said exactly what Jake was thinking. In their experience, the most effective solutions often came from doing exactly what conventional wisdom said was impossible. The afternoon brought Jake's first experience with Confederation ship simulators. The technology was so advanced that he couldn't tell the difference between simulation and reality. When he settled into the captain's chair of a simulated cruiser, every sound, vibration, and visual detail felt completely authentic. Begin Scenario 7. The simulation computer announced in a calm, professional voice. You are commanding the CNS Determination, a heavy cruiser with a crew of 1,000. Long-range sensors have detected a Devourer attack fleet approaching the civilian colony at Kepler Station. Your mission is to defend the colony using standard defensive formation protocols. Jake studied the tactical display that appeared in front of him. The Devourer fleet consisted of 50 ships advancing in a tight formation toward the colony. His own force included his cruiser and, for smaller, escort vessels. By conventional military doctrine, his force was significantly outnumbered and should request reinforcement while conducting a fighting withdrawal. Instead, Jake did something that would have been impossible with real ships and real lives at stake. He experimented. All ships, prepare for emergency acceleration toward the enemy fleet, he commanded. Sir, that action is not consistent with defensive protocols, the ship's simulated tactical officer replied. I understand. Execute the order anyway. For the next 2 hours, Jake tested every unconventional approach he could think of. He used asteroids as cover for surprise attacks. He split his force to attack from multiple directions simultaneously. He even rammed a damaged escort ship into a Devourer heavy unit, sacrificing one vessel to eliminate 3 enemy ships. The simulation computer dutifully recorded every action and its results. Most of Jake's experimental tactics failed spectacularly, exactly as military doctrine predicted they would. But a few of them worked better than conventional approaches, achieving mission objectives with fewer losses and in less time. Simulation complete, the computer announced. Overall mission success rate, 67%. Casualty rate, 15% below standard projections. Time to completion, 38% faster than doctrinal baseline. Jake sat back in the captain's chair, his mind racing with possibilities. If he could achieve better results in simulation by ignoring conventional doctrine, what might be possible with real ships and properly trained crews? That evening, Jake's crew gathered in their common room to compare notes from their first day of training. The engineering systems are incredible, Maria reported. They've got technology that makes our best construction equipment look like stone tools. But the way they use it is very conservative. Everything follows predetermined procedures. Same with the tactical systems, Tommy added. Amazing capabilities, but they only use them in ways that have been tested thousands of times before. What's interesting, Carlos observed, is that they seem genuinely curious about how humans approach problems. Several instructors asked me about improvised solutions and adaptive thinking. Jake nodded thoughtfully. I think I'm beginning to understand what Observer Zenth meant about human command instincts. It's not that we're smarter or more capable than other species. It's that we're willing to try things that logic says shouldn't work. But boss, Steve pointed out, that kind of thinking can get people killed if you're wrong. True, but it can also save lives when conventional approaches aren't working. And right now, conventional approaches are losing the war. Jake called up the strategic display again, studying the pattern of Devourer advances. The enemy was methodical and efficient, advancing steadily through Confederation space using tactics that were brutally effective but completely predictable. Look at this, Jake said, highlighting a series of enemy movements. The Devourers attack in the same pattern every time. They concentrate overwhelming force against the weakest point in a defensive line, break through, then systematically destroy everything in their path. And the Confederation responds the same way every time too, Tommy observed. Fall back to the next offensive position and try to hold the line there. What if there was a way to disrupt that pattern? Jake asked, what if instead of trying to hold every position, we gave them something unexpected to deal with? Maria leaned forward, studying the display. What did you have in mind? Jake smiled. It was the same expression he'd worn 3 weeks ago when he'd decided to turn a concrete mixer into a mountain rescue vehicle. I'm thinking we need to show the Confederation what happens when humans stop following the rules. The next morning, Jake requested a private meeting with Commander Varix. The alien officer received him in a spacious office overlooking one of the station's main training bays, where dozens of simulated ships moved through complex tactical exercises. I've been analyzing the tactical scenarios you've shown us, Jake said without preamble. I think there's a fundamental problem with current Confederation strategy. Commander Varix's 4 eyes focused on Jake with interest rather than offense. Please elaborate. You're fighting the Devourers using tactics designed for wars between civilized opponents. Opponents who follow rules, who have strategic objectives beyond simple destruction, who could be negotiated with or deterred. The Devourers don't fit that model. You are correct. The Devourers appear to be motivated purely by destruction rather than conquest or territory control. Then, why are we trying to defeat them using territorial defense strategies? Commander Varix was quiet for a long moment, his silver eyes studying Jake's face. What alternative do you suggest? Jake activated the wall display and called up the current strategic situation. Instead of trying to hold fixed defensive lines that they can systematically break through, what if we made it impossible for them to establish predictable attack patterns? I do not understand. Jake highlighted several systems where Devourer forces were currently advancing. What if small, highly mobile forces started attacking their supply lines and staging areas? What if we made them worry about defending their own territory instead of just advancing through ours? Such tactics would require commanders to operate independently, without central coordination or predetermined battle plans. Exactly. The kind of independent decision-making that humans are apparently good at. Commander Varix studied the display for several minutes, manipulating various tactical projections. Finally, he looked back at Jake with an expression that might have been excitement. Your proposal would require a complete revision of Confederation military doctrine. I know. It would involve significant risks and the possibility of substantial losses if the new tactics prove ineffective. Yes, it would. And you believe human command officers could successfully implement such an approach. Jake thought about the ice storm rescue, about his crew's willingness to trust him when he announced they were going to convert construction equipment into life-saving devices. He thought about their decision to follow him into space based on nothing more than his judgment that it was worth the risk. Commander Varix, give me a real ship and a real crew, and I'll show you exactly what human command officers can do. Commander Varix was silent for a long moment. Then he activated his communication system and spoke in a language Jake didn't recognize. The conversation that followed was brief, but seemed intense. I have just spoken with Fleet Command, Commander Varix announced when the communication ended. You and your team will be given field commissions and assigned to the CNS Defiance, a light cruiser currently stationed at Outpost Gamma 7. Your mission will be to test unconventional tactics against actual Devourer forces. Jake felt his heart rate increase. Real combat operations. Real combat operations. If your approaches prove effective, they will be implemented fleet-wide. If they prove ineffective, Commander Varix paused. The Confederation will honor your service and provide appropriate recognition for your sacrifice. Jake extended his hand in a human gesture of agreement. After a moment's hesitation, Commander Varix gripped Jake's hand with one of his forearms. When do we leave? Jake asked. Your ship departs in 6 hours. I suggest you spend that time preparing your crew for their first interstellar combat mission. As Jake walked back to the human adaptation wing, he realized that everything up to this point had been preparation. The real test was about to begin, and the stakes couldn't be higher. But as he thought about the crew waiting for him, people who'd already proven they could handle impossible situations with nothing but determination and innovative thinking, Jake felt confident they were ready. The Confederation was about to discover what humans could accomplish when they stopped worrying about following the rules and started focusing on getting the job done. The CNS Defiance was beautiful in a way that took Jake's breath away. The light cruiser stretched nearly 2 kilometers from bow to stern, its hull gleaming with the same color-shifting metal he'd first seen on Observer Xanthus scout ship. Energy conduits pulsed with soft blue light along its length, and the main engines created a gentle gravitational field that made the ship feel alive. She's got a crew of 400, explained Captain Naren, the Defiance's previous commanding officer, as he showed Jake around the bridge. Mixed crew from 8 different species, all experienced veterans. They know their jobs, but they've never worked with human command styles. Naren was a tall, slender being with pale green skin and large, intelligent eyes. He'd commanded the Defiance for 6 years and had volunteered to serve as Jake's executive officer during the transition to human command protocols. How do they feel about taking orders from someone who learned their job 3 weeks ago? Jake asked as they entered the main bridge. Curious, mostly. Your species' reputation has been building quickly since word spread about your unconventional training results. The crew wants to see what humans can do in actual combat. The bridge was a symphony of advanced technology that somehow managed to feel welcoming rather than intimidating. Workstations were arranged in a semicircle around the captain's chair, each one displaying 3-dimensional tactical information that responded to the operator's thoughts as much as their physical movements. Jake's crew had been assigned to key positions throughout the ship. Tommy served as his tactical coordinator, Maria ran engineering support, Steve handled communications, and Carlos managed logistics despite still wearing his walking cast. They'd all adapted to alien technology with the same practical efficiency they'd brought to construction work. Captain Morrison called Lieutenant Zura, the ship's Voltorian sensor operator. Her species resembled tall, graceful cats, and her voice carried a melodic quality that Jake found oddly soothing. We're receiving new orders from Fleet Command. Jake settled into the captain's chair, which immediately adjusted to his body configuration and began feeding tactical information directly into his mind through interfaces he was still learning to use. The sensation was unsettling, but incredibly efficient. Display the orders, Lieutenant. The main screen filled with a star map showing their current position near Outpost Gamma 7 and a series of systems further into contested space. Red markers indicated known Devourer positions, while yellow markers showed Confederation forces that had gone silent in the past week. Intelligence reports indicate a major Devourer offensive is developing in the Kepler sector, Jake read aloud. 6 Confederation patrol vessels have failed to report in the past 72 hours. CNS Defiance is ordered to investigate and report on enemy activities in that region. Standard reconnaissance mission, Captain Naran observed. Approach carefully, gather intelligence. Avoid engagement unless absolutely necessary. Jake studied the tactical display more carefully. The missing patrol vessels have been operating in different systems, but their patrol routes formed a pattern that suggested they'd been systematically hunted down by a coordinated enemy force. Tommy, what do you think? Jake asked his tactical coordinator. Tommy manipulated the display to show the timeline of lost contacts. Looks like someone's clearing out our scouts before launching a major attack. Classic preparation for an offensive operation. Which means by the time we get there and report back, whatever they're planning will already be in motion, Jake concluded. Sir, interrupted Lieutenant Zura. Confederation protocol requires that we follow the investigation and reporting procedures specified in our orders. Jake looked around the bridge at his mixed human and alien crew. Lieutenant, how long would it take to reach the first system where we lost contact? Approximately 18 hours at standard cruising speed. And how long for our report to reach Fleet Command and for reinforcements to be dispatched? Given current communication lag and fleet deployment schedules, approximately 4 days. Jake nodded slowly. So if the Devourers are preparing an offensive, they'll launch it long before help arrives. That assessment is correct, sir. Jake stood up and walked to the main display, studying the pattern of missing patrol vessels. Everything about the situation screamed trap, but it was also an opportunity to test his unconventional approach against real enemy forces. Captain Naran, what would standard Confederation tactics call for in this situation? Careful approach to the first missing patrol location, thorough sensor sweeps, collection of debris or survivor information, then withdrawal to report findings. And if we encountered enemy forces, immediate withdrawal to preserve the ship and crew for future missions. Jake smiled. Good thing we're not following standard tactics. The bridge fell silent except for the background hum of the ship's systems. Jake could feel the attention of every crew member as they waited to see what the human captain would do. Here's what we're going to do, Jake announced. We're going to assume the Devourers are using those missing patrol routes to stage an ambush for whoever comes looking for them. Instead of walking into their trap, we're going to set one of our own. Sir, Captain Naran said carefully, our orders specify investigation and reporting, not combat engagement. Our orders specify investigating enemy activities. What better way to investigate than to see how they react when their ambush gets turned around on them? Jake activated the tactical display and began sketching out his plan. We'll approach the area where the first patrol went missing, but we'll come in from a completely unexpected direction. Tommy, can you identify the likely ambush positions based on the patrol route? Tommy studied the system layout for a few minutes, then highlighted 3 locations where enemy ships could wait in hiding while maintaining clear firing lines on the patrol route. These are the obvious spots, Tommy reported. Good cover, clear fields of fire, multiple escape routes. Perfect. Maria, what's our maximum acceleration capability? We can pull about 12 GS for short periods without damaging the ship's structure, Maria replied from her engineering station. And our weapons range? Primary particle beams effective to about 2 light minutes. Missile systems can reach 4 light minutes with acceptable accuracy. Jake smiled. The plan forming in his mind was exactly the kind of desperate improvisation that had turned a concrete mixer into a rescue vehicle. Here's what we're going to do, Jake said, highlighting positions on the tactical display. We're going to jump into the system at maximum range from the likely ambush positions. Then, we're going to accelerate directly toward them at maximum speed while launching every missile we have. The bridge was silent for a moment. Then, Captain Narin spoke in a voice that carried careful, diplomatic phrasing. Captain Morrison, that approach would put us in extreme danger while giving the enemy multiple opportunities to destroy us. Only if they're expecting it, Jake replied. But they're not expecting it because it violates every principle of sensible military doctrine. Lieutenant Zura's ears twitched in what Jake had learned was a sign of nervous excitement among her species. Sir, what if there are more enemy ships than our sensors can detect? Then we'll adapt. Tommy, how quickly can you retarget our missiles if the tactical situation changes? Real-time retargeting, boss. These systems are incredibly responsive. Good, because we're going to be making this up as we go along. Jake settled back into the captain's chair and activated the ship-wide communication system. All hands, this is Captain Morrison. We're about to engage in our first combat operation as a crew. I know some of you are wondering what human command style looks like. Here's your answer. We're going to do something the enemy doesn't expect. We're going to do it faster than they can react, and we're going to trust each other to handle whatever surprises come up. All stations, prepare for emergency jump to combat zone. The next few minutes were a carefully orchestrated dance of preparation. Weapons systems were charged and targeted. Defensive shields were configured for maximum protection against energy weapons. The ship's artificial intelligence calculated jump coordinates and acceleration vectors. All stations report ready for combat operations, Captain Narin announced. Execute jump. The sensation of faster-than-light travel was unlike anything Jake had experienced. Reality seemed to twist around the ship for a moment that lasted both forever and no time at all, then snapped back to normal as they emerged in the target system. Contact! Lieutenant Zara called out immediately. 4 large vessels in ambush formation, exactly where Lieutenant Shun predicted. They're moving to intercept. Distance to targets? 3.7 light minutes, and closing. Perfect. Tommy, launch everything we have. Full missile barrage, targeted on the largest enemy ship. Launching 64 quantum missiles, Tommy reported. Time to target, 14 minutes. Maria, maximum acceleration directly toward the enemy formation. Full acceleration, 12 GS, and climbing. Jake felt the crushing weight of acceleration pressing him into his chair despite the ship's inertial compensation systems. The Defiance leaped forward like a predator, covering the distance to the enemy formation faster than any sane military commander would attempt. Enemy vessels are launching missiles, Lieutenant Zara reported. Approximately 200 incoming warheads. Time to impact, 16 minutes. Outstanding. That means our missiles will reach them 2 minutes before theirs reach us. The tactical display showed the developing battle as a complex dance of moving ships and missile trajectories. The Devourer formation was reacting exactly as conventional military doctrine predicted, maneuvering to optimize their defensive position while maintaining maximum firepower against the approaching Confederation vessel. What they weren't prepared for was a ship that accelerated directly toward them while launching an all-out missile attack, apparently with no regard for self-preservation. Our missiles are approaching target, Tommy announced. Enemy point defenses are engaging. How many are getting through? Looks like about 40%. Not bad for a first try. Jake watched the tactical display as their missiles reached the enemy formation. Bright flashes marked successful impacts against Devourer shields and hull armor. The largest enemy ship staggered under multiple hits, its acceleration dropping noticeably. Enemy missiles impact in 12 minutes, Lieutenant Zara called out. Defensive systems? Our point defenses can handle maybe 60% of the incoming missiles, Captain Narin reported. Jake did quick mental calculations. 80 missiles reaching his ship would be more than enough to destroy the Defiance. Time for the next phase of his improvised plan. All hands, prepare for emergency deceleration and course change. Maria, I need everything the engines can give us. Ready for emergency maneuvers, Captain. Execute. Full reverse thrust, then hard turn toward the damaged enemy ship. The Defiance groaned under the stress of sudden deceleration, followed by a sharp course change. Jake felt his inner ear struggling to keep up with the rapid shifts in motion. What are we doing? Captain Narin asked. Something they definitely won't expect. Tommy, prepare for ramming speed. The bridge fell silent, except for alarm sound from various systems as the ship's artificial intelligence protested the maneuver Jake was ordering. Sir, Lieutenant Zara said carefully, ramming an enemy vessel would likely destroy both ships. Only if we actually hit them, Jake replied. But we're not going to hit them. We're going to make them think we're going to hit them. The Defiance arrowed toward the damaged Devourer ship like a missile itself, accelerating far faster than any sane commander would risk in close combat. The enemy formation scattered as the massive ships tried to avoid what appeared to be a suicidal ramming attack. Enemy missiles have lost targeting lock, Tommy reported. They try to retarget, but our course changes are too rapid. Perfect. How close can we get to that damaged ship without actually colliding? Maybe 500 meters if Maria can handle the navigation. I can handle it, Maria called from engineering. But it's going to be close. Jake watched the distance close on the main display. 2 kilometers. 1 kilometer. 500 meters. The damaged Devourer ship loomed in front of them like a metallic mountain, its hull scarred by missile impacts and leaking atmosphere from multiple breaches. Now, Maria, emergency turned to starboard. The Defiance twisted aside at the last possible moment, passing so close to the enemy ship that Jake could see individual hull plates and weapon emplacements through the bridge windows. For a terrifying second, it seemed like they would actually collide. Then they were past, and the damaged Devourer ship was falling behind them, its crew undoubtedly as shocked as Jake's crew by the near miss. Tommy, target that ship's engines with everything we have. Targeting engines. Firing. At point-blank range, the Defiance's particle beams carved through the Devourer ship's rear armor like cutting torches through paper. Secondary explosions rippled along the enemy vessel's hull as its propulsion systems failed catastrophically. Target eliminated, Tommy reported with satisfaction. That ship's not going anywhere. Excellent. Now let's see how the other 3 react to losing their flagship. The remaining Devourer ships were regrouping, but their formation was broken and their tactical coordination disrupted. Jake had turned what should have been a carefully planned ambush into a chaotic close-range battle where conventional doctrine no longer applied. Enemy ships are trying to establish a new firing line, Lieutenant Zara reported. Don't let them. Maria, random course changes. Tommy, keep hitting them with everything we have. Make them react to us instead of implementing their own plan. For the next 30 minutes, the Defiance fought a battle that would have been impossible to predict using any known tactical doctrine. Jake's ship darted between the larger enemy vessels like a fighter plane attacking bombers, using its superior acceleration and maneuverability to avoid return fire while delivering devastating attacks at close range. The Devourers were skilled and dangerous opponents, but they prepared for a conventional engagement against an enemy who followed predictable tactical patterns. Jake's improvised approach left them constantly responding to unexpected threats instead of executing their own battle plan. When the engagement finally ended, 2 more Devourer ships were destroyed, and the 4th was retreating toward the edge of the system with significant damage. The Defiance had suffered minor hull damage and 1 injured crew member, but remained fully operational. All stations report successful completion of combat operations, Captain Thurin announced, his voice carrying a mixture of excitement and disbelief. Outstanding. Lieutenant Zura, begin detailed scans of the destroyed enemy vessels. I want to know everything we can learn about their technology and capabilities. Yes, sir. Captain Morrison. Yes, Lieutenant. That was the most terrifying and exhilarating combat experience of my career. I can see why Fleet Command is interested in human tactical approaches. Jake smiled as he watched his crew begin the post-battle analysis that would provide valuable intelligence about Devourer capabilities. They not only survived their first combat engagement, they demonstrated that unconventional tactics could be devastatingly effective against an enemy accustomed to predictable opponents. Tommy, prepare a tactical report for Fleet Command. Include detailed analysis of our approach and recommendations for implementing similar tactics fleet-wide. Already working on it, boss. I think they're going to be very interested in these results. Jake leaned back in the captain's chair, feeling the satisfaction that came from a job well done. But even as he savored their victory, he knew this was just the beginning. The Devourers would adapt to new tactics eventually, which meant the Confederation would need to keep developing new approaches. Fortunately, Humans seem to be very good at that kind of adaptive thinking. Captain Narun, set course for Outpost Gamma 7. It's time to show Fleet Command what happens when you let humans write the rules instead of following them. As the Defiance turned toward home, carrying the first decisive tactical victory against the Devourers in over 2 years, Jake Morrison began planning the next phase of his unconventional war. The enemy had just learned that humans didn't fight the way other species did. Soon, they would learn that this was only the beginning of the problems humanity was about to create for them. 6 months after the Defiance's first victory, Jake Morrison stood on the observation deck of the CNS Humanity's Edge, watching the largest fleet assembly in Confederation history. 2,000 ships from 43 different member species hung in perfect formation around a massive command vessel, their hulls gleaming in the light of the binary stars that illuminated this remote system. At the center of it all, 50 Confederation dreadnoughts waited in a formation that would have been impossible to coordinate just 1 year ago. Each ship carried crews trained in the new tactical doctrines that had emerged from human command principles. More importantly, each ship was commanded by officers who'd learned to think like humans when conventional approaches weren't working. "It's incredible," said Admiral Corvex, the Confederation's highest-ranking military officer, as he joined Jake at the observation window. The tall, crystalline being's body caught and reflected the starlight in patterns that indicated deep satisfaction. 18 months ago, we were losing systems to the Devourers faster than we could evacuate them. Now we're preparing to launch the largest offensive operation in Confederation history. Jake nodded, but his attention remained focused on the tactical displays that showed Devourer positions throughout their target sector. The real test comes when we face their main battle fleets. Everything up to now has been preparation. Preparation that has been remarkably successful. Your tactical innovations have been implemented across the entire fleet. Enemy losses in the past 6 months exceed their losses in the previous 3 years combined. Jake turned from the window to face Admiral Corvex directly. "Sir, with respect, we haven't won anything yet. We've proven that unconventional tactics can surprise the Devourers and disrupt their standard operational patterns. But they're adapting faster than we expected." Admiral Corvex's crystalline features shifted in what Jake had learned to recognize as concern. "Explain." Intelligence reports show that Devourer formations have become more flexible in the past month. They're using looser ship spacing, more varied attack patterns, and faster reaction times to unexpected threats. They're learning from our tactics and developing counters. Is that not to be expected? All military forces adapt to new threats. Yes, but the speed of their adaptation suggests a level of tactical coordination we haven't seen before. Either they have some kind of central command intelligence that's much more sophisticated than we realized, or they're using communication methods that our sensors can't detect. Jake activated a holographic display that filled the space between them with a 3-dimensional representation of recent Devourer fleet movements. Red markers showed enemy positions across dozens of star systems, connected by movement vectors that revealed a pattern of coordination spanning thousands of light years. "Look at this," Jake said, highlighting specific fleet movements. 3 weeks ago, we hit a Devourer staging area in the Vega system using surprise tactics. Within 48 hours, enemy fleets in 6 other systems had modified their defensive formations to counter the same approach. Admiral Corvex studied the display carefully. The implications are disturbing. If the Devourers can coordinate tactical responses across such distances so quickly, they possess strategic capabilities far beyond our previous estimates, which is why this offensive operation is critical. We need to force them into a large-scale engagement while we still have tactical advantages they haven't countered yet. Jake manipulated the display to show their target region, a sector of space where Devourer forces have been building a massive staging area for what intelligence suggested would be their own major offensive against Confederation core systems. The enemy has concentrated approximately 800 ships in the Arcturus Nebula, Jake continued. It's the largest Devourer fleet ever assembled, and it's positioned to strike at 12 critical Confederation worlds simultaneously. And you believe our force can successfully engage such a concentration? Jake smiled with the confidence of someone who'd learned to trust his crew's ability to handle impossible situations. "Admiral, 6 months ago, I was a construction foreman who thought his biggest problem was keeping concrete from freezing. Today, I'm planning to command the largest space battle in galactic history. If I've learned anything, it's that humans are very good at handling situations that logic says should be impossible. The briefing room aboard Humanity's Edge buzzed with activity as representatives from 43 species gathered for the final tactical conference before the offensive began. The scene would have been unimaginable just 2 years ago. Alien military officers deferring to human strategic thinking, experienced commanders from ancient civilizations asking humans for advice on tactics their species have been developing for thousands of years. The enemy position in the Arcturus Nebula presents both challenges and opportunities, Jake announced as the holographic display showed the target region in detail. The nebula itself interferes with long-range sensors and communications, which limits their ability to coordinate their forces. But it also provides excellent cover for defensive positions and makes navigation hazardous for attacking fleets. Captain Sarah Chun, Tommy's sister, and one of the newest human officers to join the fleet, raised her hand from her position among the cruiser commanders. What's our approach for dealing with the navigation hazards? We're going to use them to our advantage, Jake replied. Instead of trying to fight our way through the nebula's interference, we're going to split our force and attack from multiple directions simultaneously. The same conditions that make coordination difficult for us will make it impossible for them. Admiral Varix, who'd become one of Jake's most trusted allies since his promotion to fleet command, activated additional displays showing ship assignments and attack vectors. Human Command has designated 12 separate attack groups, each following a different route through the nebula. The enemy will be unable to predict which attacks are primary assaults and which are diversions. Commander Therein, now serving as Jake's chief of staff aboard Humanity's Edge, highlighted the timing sequences that would coordinate the complex operation. Each attack group will begin their approach at different times, ensuring that enemy forces cannot concentrate their defenses against any single thrust. What about their ability to adapt to our tactics during the engagement? Asked Captain Zurin, a Voltorian officer whose species had provided some of the fleet's most innovative tactical thinking. If they can coordinate responses as quickly as recent intelligence suggests, they may counter our approaches before we can achieve our objectives. Jake had been expecting this question. It was the critical weakness in any plan that relied on surprise and unconventional tactics. That's exactly why we're not going to use the same approaches that have been successful in recent engagements, Jake replied. This operation will employ completely new tactical concepts that we've never tested against Devourer forces. The briefing room fell silent as officers from dozens of species absorbed the implications of Jake's statement. They were about to commit the largest fleet in Confederation history to battle using tactics that had never been proven in combat. Captain Morrison, Admiral Corvex said carefully, "Are you suggesting that we base this critical operation on untested theoretical approaches?" "No, sir. I'm suggesting that we base it on human approaches that the Devourers have never encountered and therefore cannot have developed counters for." Jake activated a new tactical display that showed formation patterns unlike anything in standard Confederation military doctrine. We're going to fight this battle the way humans fought battles on Earth before we knew there were other species in the galaxy. Fast, flexible, and completely unpredictable. Over the next 3 hours, Jake outlined tactical concepts that borrowed from everything from ancient naval warfare to modern urban combat. Small, fast ships would operate like submarine wolf packs, hitting enemy formations and disappearing before retaliation was possible. Heavy units would use cover and concealment tactics adapted from terrestrial tank warfare. Command and control would be decentralized to the point where individual ship captains could modify their orders based on immediate tactical conditions. This approach requires every commander to think independently and adapt to changing conditions without waiting for orders from higher command, Jake explained. It's the opposite of everything the Confederation military has traditionally emphasized. And you believe our officers can successfully implement such tactics? Admiral Corvex asked. I believe the officers in this room have already proven they can think like humans when the situation demands it. Now we're going to find out what happens when an entire fleet thinks like humans. The battle for the Arcturus Nebula began 48 hours later, when the first Confederation attack groups entered the outer regions of the nebula and began their approach toward enemy positions. Jake commanded the operation from humanity's edge, but his role was coordination rather than direct control. Each attack group commander had complete authority to modify their approach based on local conditions. Group 7 has made contact with enemy picket ships, reported Lieutenant Commander Martinez, the human officer who served as Jake's tactical coordinator. Captain Durin reports successful elimination of forward sensors with minimal opposition. Group 3 is encountering heavier resistance than expected, added Commander Silas, a Sylvani officer who managed fleet communications. They're requesting permission to modify their approach vector. #the hook that changes everything. What happens when a simple construction foreman's split-second decision to save lives during an ice storm catches the attention of an ancient galactic civilization? What if that same human's stubborn refusal to abandon anyone, even aliens he's never met, becomes the catalyst that transforms Earth from an isolated planet into the command center of the galaxy's most feared armada? This is the story of Jake Morrison, a man who thought his biggest challenge was keeping his crew safe during harsh weather. He had no idea that his actions during one brutal ice storm would echo across the stars, turning him from a small-town hero into the strategic mind behind humanity's rise to galactic prominence. Sometimes the universe doesn't need chosen ones or destined heroes. Sometimes it just needs someone who refuses to give up, no matter how impossible the odds become.